This is the CreaseCast.
Welcome to the CreaseCast, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
It's a bit of a day late episode with our trade deadline recap, but you can send all your hate mail to the AHL, who thought it was a good idea to schedule the Comets into 19 games in 36 days after their COVID layoff that they had over the last month.
But surely no one else would be crazy enough to do that. So no other league, no pro. You never see the NHL say doing something as crazy as 19 games in 36 days. Was that it? 36.
Yes, so the AHL has elected to do 19 and 36, but the NHL values integrity, competitive integrity, so they opted for a more reasonable 19 and 30, which, like, we can get into that like a bit later. But anyways, folks, sorry that this episode's coming a bit late. You can blame the Comets for front loading their schedule with 2 back-to-backs in a span of 6 days. That means I'm on game recap duty 2 nights in a row and then have to cram in game stats tracking for the next 2 days on top of everything else that's going on in my life, which is a lot. And then you squeeze in the trade deadline in that as well. And I think you and I both were kind of like, they're not going to do anything. There's no way the Canucks are going to do anything. This trade deadline, like, they're just like in this awkward spot. Jim Benning comes out on the Friday or something like that, and he's like, oh, like, the human element matters a lot to me, and I'm not going to trade anybody that has COVID after this, like, period of time we're going through. So everyone's kind of like, they're not going to do anything. And then literally the day of the deadline, it's like,
all hell breaks loose.
Everything I just said. Gaudette, he literally, like, got announced that he's come off the COVID list or the protocol list. It was like the second that happened, Jim was like, he's out of here. And then Jordie Benn also gets shipped because, like, I mean, he didn't really ever have a strong footing with the team anyway, so it was kind of just like a sure thing he was going to be gone no matter what. And then they do a little pick flippy, and suddenly a trade deadline where you and I kind of weren't anticipating having a lot to talk about becomes a lot to talk about, because the best thing that happened out of this was Jim Benning did another press conference.
Yes, that's right. He did since
he did radio as well.
Since we last did a show, he did the one on Friday, talking about the Tanner Pearson and the Thatcher Demko extensions, but it was really just about the Pearson one.
Yeah.
And as well as, like, talking about updating everybody on the COVID situation, right? Mm-hmm, and then he went on the radio, kind of yelled at some people, not like yelled at them, but definitely there was some frustration going on. Yes. And then you get to Monday, and first of all, just want to say thanks a lot, NHL, for scheduling the trade deadline on a Monday. Really, really appreciated that. Normally every year I do, like, a live blog on the trade deadline day, and I purposely take the day off to do it. And this year I didn't, specifically because I kind of, I kind of forgot. Like, it kind of snuck up on me in the sense of too late to schedule a day off sort of thing. So it was still, like, 2 weeks away, but too late for me to actually put in the request for the time off.
Sure.
And also I kind of let it slip because I was like, they're not going to do anything. I didn't think they were going to do anything that significant that would warrant me staying home all day and typing out stuff. And then I get the DM from you, and I'm like, once again, you alert me to what's going on.
I do.
Where Gaudette gets traded to the Blackhawks. Adam Gaudette gets traded to the Blackhawks in exchange for Matthew Highmore, a noted forward that we all know and love, and definitely didn't have to search on the internet before doing that. Before any of us did the show, and I'm including all media.
Right now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not searching him right now. That's for sure.
My first thought was, you know what? The only thing I know about Matthew Highmore, knew prior to them picking him up is his versatility. I mean, he's shown that he can do well in The Good Doctor on ABC, and he also showed that he can carry a bad team like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that 2005 remake with Johnny Depp. Terrible movie. But he held down the fort. But then I was told that that's actually a different person. Yeah, Freddie Highmore.
Wait,
do you not know who that is?
What? No.
Freddie Highmore, the kid.
But is Freddie Highmore both the Good Doctor and the kid from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Yeah, he's also in the Spiderwick Chronicles. That other movie. That's him. He's also in Finding Neverland. Neverland, I think, is the other one.
That's actually where I know him from, I believe. Because I knew it was the better Johnny Depp movie.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's a good drop. That's a good reference. But kind of a weird trade because of the whole Gaudette is coming off, or he's not coming off of this year, but last year he was a 30-point guy in a very sheltered role. He could be a very good power play contributor. Chris Faber of Canucks Army has been preaching the Adam Gaudette individual expected goals and Corsi for and scoring chances generated by him. He's been all about the underlying stats and how he's just been having rotten shooting luck. And then in exchange, they get a guy who's got 8 points in 76 games in his entire NHL career, 80 games or something. It's not nearly comparable to what Gaudette's brought offensively to the NHL.
No. So over the course of it looks like about 4 seasons prior to this, he has kind of jumped back and forth in between the Blackhawks and the Rockford Ice Hogs of the AHL. He did all right 1 year in the AHL, 43 points in 64 games with the Ice Hogs in 2017-18. Last year, he played 36 games with the Hawks, had 6 points. Also played 9 playoff games and got 3 goals and an assist in 9 playoff games last year. Which I believe is where a lot of Jim Benning's management team based their decision to pick him up off of from seeing him in the bubble. This year he's played 24 games, only 2 assists. He's been a bit of a non-factor for them, but of course because of the taxi squad stuff, he has not been able to go down to the AHL like normal, so they've held on to him for most of the year. I am glad that we did this episode. Originally, I was thinking we were going to maybe do this episode yesterday, on Monday, right after the deadline, because I was just watching kind of a little bit fuming, and I was like, and I'm glad we slept on it a little bit here, because I think I'm a little bit more calm and rational today.
Yeah, we were both pretty heated in our little conversation, not with each other, folks, don't worry.
No.
Lachlan and I get along, but we were very kind of just
no
what the fuck is the game plan? What's the plan here? What's the sense in any of these moves? And I've calmed down a bit, but at the same time I'm also still I still don't see a semblance of a plan, because if the reports are true and that they were reportedly shopping Gaudette earlier this year, months ago, which, I mean, I don't know if any of them have looked at the calendar, but months ago was December. Months ago was January, when the season started. So, it's not like months ago is, way before, mid-season. It's no, that's the start of the season. So you're telling me during the start of the season you soured on him and you were ready to get rid of him?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's very bizarre. And It's kind of if you weren't certain about what he could bring next year, or if you were gonna in your management meeting, you said, okay, if Gaudette takes another step, that's really good for us. But if he doesn't, then we need to move on. Then wouldn't your gut instinct be, if it's if the worst case scenario is we need to get rid of him, then wouldn't you just sell high on him? 33-point young center who's like lowest qualifying offer was like sub $1 million, I would have sold high. And instead, like we know they do with multiple assets, is they sell low.
Yeah, they let it they very clearly far too often sell players, not just prospects, lots of players. They sell just
Everything.
way too late.
Everything they sell too late, too low. When was I mean, I don't think anyone's ever been sold high on this team.
I think I think you could kind of argue Eric Goodbranson was sold high considering what Tanner Pearson gave
and
them
considering
in the long run.
And considering he still has some kind of pedigree with NHL GMs for some reason, Nashville gave up a pick for him.
Yeah, I was gonna say he got a seventh. He garnered a seventh
that's what
rounder.
I mean. Is it really selling high on him, or is it just like NHL GMs for whatever reason just have a mold of a type of guy that they love? And Goodbranson, even though all the metrics will say do not sign this guy, everyone wants him because he's big and he's very, very, very handsome. Which is true. Yes. Like, I mean, I get it.
Yes, I totally get that too. There's a lot of stuff going on below the surface when it comes to the Gaudette trade. A lot of it's there's just a lot of layers to it because it's not as clear cut. It's clearly not as clear cut as, oh, this player's not good. We don't like this player, or he's not good enough, sort of thing. It very clearly in the last 24 hours has become, well, I wouldn't say clear, but there's a lot of rumors and stuff floating out there that it's not so much about the on ice stuff, and we're not going to get into that too much today because we don't know anything. We don't know anything about what's going on in that. So it's kind of it'd be shitty of us to speculate on what those things are because a lot of them are unsubstantiated rumors. The things that we can talk about are according to Elliot Friedman. He was on 31 Thoughts today. One of the things that he mentioned is that a couple of the people that he's talked to about the COVID situation. Some players have said that that the coverage of it was overblown. Others have said that it was awful, and that, like I've said, other people have said it's completely awful, and there's a clear divide on that front.
Yeah,
and that in itself screams not good. Things are not good in the locker room if you're having a divide over what's going on in there on the seriousness of the COVID situation. And what also came out is the fact that whether or not the COVID outbreak was Adam Gaudette or Adam Gaudette's fault necessarily. Whether or not that's the case, it does sound like the team really put some of the blame on him, or really made him shoulder the blame as patient zero here, which is not good. Which is the right thing to do.
Which is why we don't want to get into the speculation side of it, because I mean, if what Friedman's reporting and that the team soured or whatever and blamed him for need we remind you that this is a global pandemic where you could stay indoors for 3 weeks straight and go outside once and do some kind of activity that requires you to interact with the public, and you can catch it just as frequently as someone who spends every day outdoors interacting with the public and doesn't get it. It's pure luck of the draw. And if it is true that the players soured on him, if the ones with families or whatever were get this guy out of here because he's the reason why we're all sick right now, that reflects very poorly on those players, that management group. And sure, maybe it wasn't the dominating factor for why they moved on from him, but the fact that it's even coming up at all and it's a point of contention is kind of really gross. And it's just unfair to voice some kind of frustration over how people deal with the COVID pandemic themselves and project that onto these two players or this player who could have done everything perfectly, and if he still got it, there's nothing he could have done anyway. And to place blame on him because you're sick is just really gross.
Yeah,
And
that's not.
I
Yeah,
saw a
that's a
few.
little.
I saw a few things on Twitter where people were like, "Oh, like people legitimately speculating and naming names, like, oh, so and so would be the type to." No, do
No.
not do this shit. I messaged the person direct, or I think I replied and I was like, delete this because nobody in their right mind should be speculating who would be the type to ask this guy to be or ask the GM to trade this guy because he doesn't take COVID seriously, and it is
You don't know the
highly
players.
highly unethical to imply on Twitter that you have information on said player breaking COVID protocol or doing something that might have got him or his wife or the team by extension sick. Like, I'm not going to name names,
Yeah.
but if
No.
you have a radio show
No, don't do that. No, no, no. It's not worth it. Like, look, it's what if you have information like, okay, whether or not if you have okay, first of all, if you actually had information and you're a media person, you would be you would actually put it out there. You don't just go, "Oh, I know things.
Yeah.
I've heard things." You don't do that because that's not doing
That's
your
scummy.
damn job.
It is
That's
so
scummy,
scummy.
and it's more or less just, oh, you actually have nothing. You're just
you
pretending
just
you have.
want attention for the fact that you have. You know what it is?
Yeah.
It's you know when Michael Scott. I don't know if you're an Office watcher.
I've binged The
okay.
Office. I've seen it all.
Okay, so in The Office, when he finds out that Jim likes Pam, and he goes around the office and he basically like can't help but want to talk about this secret that Jim doesn't want talked about. It's like that, where some guy is so happy that he knows something he probably shouldn't know, and he just desperately wants to let everyone know that he knows it. That's what this comes off as. And so if you are listening to this and you see anyone doing this kind of shit, block them, mute them,
or just ignore them. They don't.
Yeah,
They're
just ignore them. Don't encourage that kind of behavior. CreaseCast is we're not like fans of Gaudette either. Like that, I saw that too, where some people are like, oh, like people are just like defending Gaudette because he plays Warzone and they like his wife for going on the broadcast or whatever. And it's like, that shouldn't matter. Like if this was Jordie Benn and people said this kind of crap, I'd be like, no, like don't. This is like a basic human thing. I would never want anyone to be speculating that they did something against the rules.
We harp on a lot is Jake Virtanen. And if this happened to Jake Virtanen, it's the same deal. Like it's the same thing of, no, who cares? It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Leave them alone. Let them do their job. It's very easy to catch COVID. I mean, no better example of that is then the fact that Travis Boyd literally got over a week of quarantine, had one practice or maybe two with the Canucks, obviously wasn't talking to them outside, having any sort of contact with them outside, and still got COVID. Like, that's how easy it is to get it. That's how easy it is to get COVID. So if you're going to go out and blame players for getting sick, that's not okay. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Cody. But I did go off on a little bit of a tangent on Twitter. I've noticed I'm doing that more, and I don't like it. I've got to stop doing that.
Tangents are good. I'm a big tangent guy.
I am not a tangent guy, and I can tell I don't do it well, so I stick away from it. But basically, the thing that really rubbed me the wrong way about this whole situation, more or less, from a hockey standpoint, I should say, was Jim Benning on Friday, more or less unprompted, was like, oh, we're not going to trade anybody, or like basically was like, we're not going to do anything because, this is such a tough time for people and everything.
We care about the human element.
We care about the human element, like that stuff, right? And on one hand, like, I'm not going to fault a guy for being for that sort of thing, but it's also like, I think it was Julia Random on Twitter. I think is her username.
Yeah.
She was very quick on the hey, I call BS on this because I mean, when you didn't even call Chris Tanev to let him know, you basically left Chris Tanev to the very end. Why are you all of a sudden Mr. Loyalty, right? And I was like, and basically Chris Tanev wouldn't even return Jim Benning's calls, I believe, because of they just left him completely in the dark on anything that was going on till the bitter end when they decided they were going to circle back to him, right? So it is kind of like, okay, you're suddenly the loyalty guy, okay, like, sure, I don't think that's necessarily the best thing business-wise, but you know what? Sure, put your money where your mouth is. Don't move anybody. Don't move any of your players off the roster if you're going to make that kind of a claim, right? So for him to go and do it to the first player who got sick, maybe I'm wrong here, but that felt shitty to me. Like, that was very much, and I would put Jordie Benn in the same camp too, frankly. In the sense of, like, if you're going to come out and say that I care about, like, you know, my players, I care about, you know, not making this time any harder on them sort of thing, and then you go out and trade two guys, that to me is like, okay, so you were just full of it. Like, you didn't actually care.
You're just playing PR, basically.
It very much screamed to me at the time that, oh, he's just making an excuse for if he doesn't get anything done. Like, if no trades happen, that he's going to use the pandemic as the reason why.
Yeah.
And because I don't think it came up in the press conference after the deadline. I don't think that came up. I think, well, actually, okay, I take that back. It did come up briefly. It did come up with Brandon Sutter. Well, or at least we believe it was Brandon Sutter when he said one player wasn't going to. I asked if he was willing to move. He said no because of family. We presume that's Brandon Sutter. I believe he has a pregnant wife right now. You know, he doesn't want to move during COVID. He was very sick. That rubbed me the wrong way. I was not cool with that. I didn't like this idea that they came out and basically was trying to kind of play, like, really give Jim Benning it felt like he was trying to give himself a bit of a hero's angle. And look how brave I am sort of thing. And I really didn't like that. It was an ugly one. That bothered me a lot. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's completely off base for me to say.
Well,
but that's how I felt at the time. And whether or not this trade was going to happen, it seemed, I guess, like it was eventuality regardless of what happened here. Just some of the stuff that's come out. Like, again, one of the other things we definitely know right now is that apparently the team did not appreciate Michaela Gaudette tweeting about her symptoms.
Which is so stupid. Like, who cares?
Is very well. That's totally not okay. Like, that's she is not part of, whether or not, yes, she is the wife of one of your players, but she should not factor in. She is not she's not part of the team. And even if it was Adam himself tweeting about it, why? Why is that not okay? Why? Or if it was Petey or Bo, if it was any other player, why would it matter if they tweeted about or they were informing people about their symptoms? Why would that have any sort of impact?
It's kind of bizarre because it's like you have all these instances where players tweet out like support of like causes, like, you know, Brock Besser is very vocal about like support for Parkinson's and stuff like that with his dad. And like to say like, or not publicly say, they obviously didn't say this through back channels and stuff like that, but to imply that Adam Gaudette's wife, Michaela, isn't entitled to voice like the harsh realities and truth of a global pandemic disease that affects literally everybody, that it hit them hard. Like, why would you try and quell or silence like the harsh reality that this disease fucking sucks and it can kill people? Like, there's obviously, I would love to get like the broadcast opinion on this, because it seems like some kind of subtle misogyny where hockey teams expect the wives and girlfriends of their players to just be dead silent, be pretty faces who don't actually interact with the public, but they keep their players happy. That's the vibe I kind of get, because obviously, if basically just saying, hey, my husband feels shitty and so do I, but we're trying to like stay well, that's a problem for the team. Like that seems so gross to me.
I don't even think it's just the fact. I don't think it even is the the fact that it's necessarily the sexist angle so much as it is like I would imagine they would be just as mad about it if it was a player. Like I think they expect the players to not let and their wives not let anything out of any sort of like news out of the locker room or out of the arena sort of thing.
Right.
So I don't think they liked any sort of information about what's going on with the team being made public by somebody without their consent sort of thing. I don't think in this particular case it mattered about about it being a wife rather than a player. I think they would have been just as annoyed. I think they would have been just as upset about it. And I think
it is very funny that I'm just realizing that we're having this topic about possible misogyny and you're wearing an Ice the Misogyny shirt.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite sweater. Can I just say it's my favorite?
It's a good
sweater. It's a good sweater.
It's just very funny given the present topic of conversation because
oh my god, oh dear.
I mean, because I've seen it on Twitter too, where a lot of people point out like, oh, during the broadcast live stream on International Women's Day, Michaela Gaudette pointed out how the NHL basically tried to make her like a fucking stay-at-home like wife and just not go outside at all and to order in her groceries, order in everything, don't go outside. And she was like I need to get groceries. So like I said, fuck that, which is like completely fair. Like I have to go get groceries. So like if someone told me, hey, don't get groceries, I'd be like, well, fuck you. Like I still need to live my life. And like I didn't come to Vancouver to sit in an apartment in downtown Vancouver for 4 months while my husband fucks off for weeks at a time to go play hockey games. You know what I mean? Like that's where my whole, is this just like the NHL's like apparent misogyny where they just expect the wives and girlfriends of their players to zip their lip and not say anything that brings press towards the team. That's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of angle I'm pushing for. But anyway, we don't want to go too long about Gaudette and the issues. And the reason I kind of pulled it back necessarily from the who it is because I feel like this has happened with the Canucks before, like in the Benning era. Obviously not with COVID, but there have been I feel like there have been cases of players where they like. It's not that they let something out, it's that they do something that the team doesn't like or the team is just not happy about. Specifically, I feel like video games have come up before. Like the Warzone streams was something that came up with Gaudette. I feel like I'm trying to remember who it was, but that's come up before. Well, it was Michael Del Zotto and Bo Horvat back in 2015, 16 or whatever, and they're like, we're banning video games on the road because I don't know, they wanted players to do more out or events outside with each other, and then
which is ironic now because Bo Horvat and Brandon Sutter and Jay Beagle famously play Mario Kart on the plane.
Which is yeah, I mean, fuck, we can get into that in another episode, but always seemed so hypocritical to me to be like, you ban they ban players from bringing their Nintendo Switches and their PS4s or whatever on the road, but then the literal next video that they did with Bo Horvat, it's him talking about how he plays N64 on the plane. It's like, what?
That's come out. That's been a while. I think the older players left, those policies changed, which is good.
So we think, but now this policy with Adam Gaudette and people apparently having issues with his public persona or whatever, where you kind of go, okay, maybe him streaming Warzone is apparently a big issue in this organization who's had issues with online gaming before. So, I mean,
maybe
it's sus, as you say in a game of Among Us.
Yes, love that game. I will say this, that I think the reason this trade has hit people, some people in the market and some fans, particularly tough. And we'll get into the hockey aspect of it in a second again, because I feel like we've kind of glossed over that, frankly, is that he was a likable guy, in terms of the fan base and everything, because he actually did interact with fans and media people. I mean, I think Faber posted on Twitter, the video of him making a joke with having a joke with Adam about Warzone and everything, right?
Yeah,
They've played
and he
before.
referred to him by his nickname, which is like very cute, and that's like
And
fine. Where it's like
then you don't get that
you
often.
should have that. You should have players willing to be themselves in public and not just like the Bo Horvats of the world who are just like, oh, we got to do what we can do for the team. Got to put pucks in deep. Just got to keep trying out there. Like that boring Control C and Control V, like same shit, boring old hockey man answers. Like
Especially because we're getting into that era where that is so key, is being able to interact with your fans and being able to showcase your players on other levels outside your athletes outside of just the sport that they play is so important. And like the NBA does that.
That's what
really
we criticize
well.
the NHL for being bad at, is never promoting athletes properly, and
Right.
they try to take a stance of like, oh, we're on Twitter and we promote like guys in videos, and
they're doing a better job. They're doing better than they used to, but it's baby steps still.
But at the same time, then you have instances like what we're hearing from Elliot Friedman, where the NHL got wind of the behind the scenes implications that maybe someone wasn't following protocol, and basically got pissed off that Michaela Gaudette was tweeting publicly that her player boyfriend was sick. And it's like, so what do you want? Do you want players to be themselves so that you can advertise them? Or do you want a cookie cutter shape that you can just like put into random video where a player talks about his favorite celly?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they obviously have an idea of what they want to promote. And it sucks when a player like Gaudette, who's like, I mean, sure, like if he wasn't gelling with the locker room anymore, then like, his time was going to be up eventually. So who cares? Like, I'm fine with it. But obviously, like, our issues come from the fact that it seems like they sold low. They probably could have sold way higher on him. Like, wherever Gaudette goes, if he sticks in the NHL, like, I'll probably still like look for his highlights because his cellies are fucking rad. And he plays Warzone and is completely public about the fact that he like likes to game. Like, that's cool. That makes him personable, which is what you need from a guy who gets paid $1 million in a sport that is exclusively dominated by, rich white athletes from rich white backgrounds, right? So
it's going to be a big deal if specifically Elias Pettersson keeps kind of going on the track that he is, where he's getting relatively. Is
he going to now though? Open. Because we had the whole hot Pettersson summer where he's hiring photographers, hiring like branding people to take pictures of him just doing shit downtown, taking videos of him doing shit downtown, like, and then he has a rough start to his season, and then all of these whack ass reporters and fans on Facebook and Twitter start saying he sucks because he spent so much time on Instagram and just like living his life. So it's like, what do people want? Do you want Pettersson to have a personality, or are you going to throw it in his face when he finally shows it? Same thing with Gaudette. He showed personality, and then the second you have a reason to not like him, you throw it back on him and they're probably saying, oh, spent too much time on Warzone. That's why his season's like, you got to pick a lane. And that's what we can tie it back to with the whole trade deadline for the Canucks in general, is like, what lane are you choosing?
Yes. And with the Gaudette trade itself, there was one thing that really stuck out with me, not just in the fact that they sold really low on Gaudette because of just the bad luck he had been having this season. It's the fact that when they were talking to Jim Benning about it in the interview afterwards, again, because Jim Benning, PR is not his strong suit. He literally, like, they asked him about why they traded him. Like, he said the change of scenery thing. Okay, that's common. That's run of the mill for most GMs. But then he also was like, we expected him to take a bigger step this year, and that didn't happen. He was all right, I believe was the quote or something, right? He was all right. Yeah. Basically, it's very much the Jim Benning special of stabbing the guy on the back on the way out. And like, because he's done it before. And here's the thing that really, like, when I heard that, I immediately was like, I am pretty darn sure that this is the stuff he says in the trade talks, right? Because imagine you say that. Imagine you're the GM of the team. You're Stan Bowman, GM of the Blackhawks. Imagine you hear Jim Benning say that in the press conference after, and this is something that is news to you, right? You'd immediately be calling him like, hey, what the hell? Did you just sell me damaged goods, right?
Yeah.
So, which means to me, maybe I don't have as much intel on what goes on behind the scenes and what GMs talk about and stuff, but it sure sounds to me like that's something that he would have said in the trade talks, which also means that, hey, is Jim Benning essentially talking himself out of better returns by giving up
being
way
completely
too
honest?
much?
I mean,
by being way too much
be.
to the teams he's dealing with.
Because yeah, like you look at the stats and stuff of Matthew Highmore and just like his career trajectory. He's older, he has less points, and like in his quotes today with the media, he's like, "Man, I sure hope to find my goal scoring touch in the NHL." It's like, buddy, it's been like 4 years, man. It's not happening. But like, you're totally right
time.
because
there's
it's like,
time.
Because Jim has a tendency to kick dirt on the graves of people as they walk out. It happens with everyone in management. It happens with former players. Anything to save the image of his management group from looking like fucking idiots, which 99.9% of the time, the moves that they make or the reasons these players get moved out is because they're fucking idiots. Like, bottom line, that's what it is. And this, like you said, like earlier was the whole, we're not trading anyone because of family reasons. That's all PR because he's saving himself again from the idea of looking like an idiot. And then he traded Gaudette, and in the fucking press call where he had a chance to explain why they moved on from him, he spent the entire press call giving a bunch of reasons and kicking dirt on Adam Gaudette's fucking character so that they wouldn't look like fucking idiots. He said, Gaudette, was asking for more ice time. We were expecting more from him, and he didn't bring much this year. Like, just completely shitting on the kid on his way out. And it's like, buddy.
He did this with Jake Virtanen, too. Like, because in the offseason, he did it with Jake Virtanen, where he was
But he didn't sell on Jake. He kept him.
But that's the thing. He might have talked himself out of trading Jake Virtanen because he had gone public and been like, he wasn't good enough this year. We expect more out of him. Went in like the end of the season interviews interview at the end of the year last season, right? Like, he does this all the time, where he publicly is way too honest about a player. And almost certainly tanks their value more by talking about it.
Yeah, like just look at Sven Baertschi. Like, Sven Baertschi gets demoted to the AHL. He doesn't really know why. The Jim Benning doesn't really offer any reasons to why he was being sent down, just saying that he isn't like a fit. And then like months later, he basically publicly says, I tried to trade him, but nobody wants him. And then he throws him on like unconditional waivers so everyone can take him. So then the whole league knows nobody's a buyer, so they're not going to take any package involving Sven. Like, all you can do is just have you sigh and be like, it's just, it's more of the same rinse and repeat where it's like nothing, you haven't learned anything. The Tanner Pearson deal, right? That was nothing's been learned. We're still signing guys that are projected to be in the bottom six in the next couple of years who are going to be 30 something to multi-year, multi-million dollar contract extensions. And then this trade deadline was more of the same too. Instead of selling high on a player like Gaudette last year, they sold low on him at the trade deadline. And what did they get back? A reclamation project. A guy that he admitted, or that they admitted Jim Benning had seen in junior or liked in junior 4 years ago, and we're still holding out hope that he would be something. And it's like,
okay,
at some point you have to move on.
I will defend defend slightly by saying that, look, reclamation projects can pay off. Can pay off in the right situations. I mean, he is how old? He's 25, so he's older, but he is not past the point of no return or anything. He is potentially. Oh, okay.
He's absolutely at the age where, like, if he hasn't figured it out now, like, look at Jake Virtanen. You know what I mean? Like, he's a year younger and he hasn't figured it out, and the chances of him just like being like the guy are very slim. Matthew Highmore can barely stick in an NHL lineup, and even though he's on the worst team in the league last year, he still did nothing.
But what have I said before? Like, the right franchise and the right fit might not always be the right team. You can find success on teams with other groups, potentially, just because they're a better fit for you than the last team was.
Especially with the Canucks, where there's so many gaping holes in their lineup, where Matthew Highmore probably slots into the middle six off of an injury to Tanner Pearson, because that's how fucking like shallow they are.
Right. It very well could happen that just because of the way the Canucks are structured or the way that they're coached, that he could end up becoming better, that he could end up developing into a decent bottom six guy. That is entirely possible, but the fact is they should have been able to, based on what Adam Gaudette has in his track record, has in his on his resume, they should have been able to get more. Had they waited to trade him at a better time when his points have picked up a little bit, like in the offseason, had they traded him during last offseason when his stock was arguably at its highest.
It's peaked that it'll ever be, basically, yeah.
Right. This is the kind of thing that drives us bananas, is that it very much seems like this team can't get out of its own way when it comes to trying to actually sell players at the right time, because when it is the right time to sell on a player, like whether or not you want Gaudette was going to be here long term, if trading him was the plan, they basically go, like, they'll see him at their peak and they'll go, oh, well, now we're going to keep him because he's good. But then when they're bad, it's like, okay, now we're going to trade them because they're bad. Like, it's very it's too reactionary.
That's the day-to-day mentality.
We have no plan. Right, we have no plan. That's really what you're saying, is you have zero plan.
That's what this trade deadline was just more confirmation, as if we hadn't already gotten endless amounts of confirmation that the day-to-day plan is what they've been doing and toiling with for the last 7 years, and that's why the team sucks.
I mean, for God's sakes, Matthew Highmore, they talked about as he's a center, and this is why we're bringing him in. How many faceoffs has he taken at the NHL level? I believe the answer, without I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe it's 7.
He's taken less. He's taken less over his full career than Brock Besser has taken this season. Like,
that tells you everything you need to know. Brock Besser has never played center in his entire major career. He has never done it. Maybe in minor hockey as an 8-year-old he did, but he hasn't since before college. He's a winger, and yet the Canucks are bringing a guy in to play center who has only taken 7 NHL faceoffs, which
blows my mind, because it's like, is that literally what Bowman said to him? Did Bowman call him up and was like, "Hey, your Gaudette kid isn't that good. Got this kid here. He can play center." That's probably all that happened. Is they said he can play center, and that was all they heard. We're like, okay, and.
Maybe. I mean, it's hard to. It's another one of those.
How they thought this value was equitable. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't really check out. It doesn't check all the boxes appropriately.
Yeah, I've used the comparable before, but it feels like this could be an Eric Goodbranson situation where they bring in a guy to do one role, to do a specific role that they are not built to do. That they're not comfortable necessarily doing, but they will refuse to let it go. They just refuse to let it die, or at the very least put the player in the situation that's more proper for them. And there's already and one of the other things, the nuggets that we don't even have necessarily time to go into today, is that Jim Benning, again, unprompted, brought up Nikita Trampkin as a possibility for another defenseman signing. Which
that
again,
is so
remember,
fucking baffling that we are in year 7 of this organization, economy? And he is talking about fucking Nikita Trampkin as like the solution to their problems. Like,
oh dear.
I don't like. Let's not get into it because it'll.
Yeah, we don't have time. Other than the fact that Nikita, famously, the Canucks wanted Nikita Trampkin to play like Zdeno Chara because he was tall, and that's what he.
And then he
was big.
They showed him a highlight package of Chris Pronger. I think it was
all well known. Yeah, which is not what Nikita. Fun fact: that's not the style of play Nikita Trampkin plays. But they were going to basically try and completely change his entire game to fit what they wanted. Even though that's not how it works. That's not how people work. Yeah. That's not how people work. And I can see this possibly becoming the case for Matthew Highmore. But I hold out hope that it turns out better for him because I don't want to see Matthew Highmore fail, obviously.
Especially when you give up Gaudette to a team like the Blackhawks, where Gaudette does probably stand a good chance of playing top 6 as a winger with, like, fucking Patrick Kane.
Oh no, I didn't even think about that aspect. I don't want to think about that aspect. But if we want to look at one of the bright sides of this trade, at the very least, Matthew Highmore does have term, one more year at $725K. That's equitable. That's cheap. Depth, good. They need more of that. That is important. That is an important thing that can't be overlooked. If you were going to put a grade on this trade, where would you put it?
It's a D, man. All I can see is
full stop
the fact
D.
That, like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, if you're not using the YouTube feed, we recently upgraded to an actual podcast platform for doing this now, and we now have overlays and stuff.
We got overlays and stuff, we're actually trying really hard now, so that's actually pretty cool. As if we weren't trying before.
Weren't trying hard before. Yeah. Get out.
Speaking of not trying hard, in addition to trading Adam Gaudette to the Blackhawks and getting Matthew Highmore, they also made another trade with the Blackhawks, and that was for Madison Bowey and a 21 fifth round draft pick. I thought this was actually, the player's negligible. Tidy. Like, he's like really just fallen off. He's played like 7 games or something in the last 2 seasons or something.
He was supposed to be a big deal because he played on the Kelowna Rockets during their really great era of like dominance in the WHL. They made it to, I believe, the Memorial Cup final. I believe actually against Mikey DiPietro and the Windsor Spitfire was one of the teams they played when they got there in I believe that's 2015 or. I believe 2015, I believe, is the year they made it there. Had 19 points in 19 playoff games. Not a bad run. Right. And four points in 7 games at the under 20 in the World Juniors, because he was a World Juniors guy as well. But it hasn't translated over for, well, you say that, but we actually haven't had that many World Juniors guys.
No, I mean, from
at least Canadians.
In the sense that Jim Benning always puts a premium on players' World Juniors performance, so I could very well see him hearing Madison Bowey's also on the table. Also, okay, so
and puts a premium on WHL guys.
If you're also looking at this Chicago Blackhawks trade in totality, it is Adam Gaudette and a 4th round pick for Madison Bowey, Matthew Highmore, and a 6th round pick. The interesting thing for me is that a lot of teams were trading for 2022 draft picks because there's more certainty that you'll have more to evaluate off of, whereas the Canucks placed a premium, or not a premium, but they prioritized getting picks for this year's draft, which means they obviously know something that other teams don't, because I think every single trade I saw was like 2022 2nd round pick, 2022 3rd round pick. Like, nobody in the NHL has really any confidence that they know who's good and who's not for this upcoming draft. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
And the whole point of this draft, basically, because of how little everybody has to go off of, It's very much just okay, how many picks can you pick up? How many more lottery tickets can you have in your back pocket? Because you could very much get guys in the 4th or 3rd round that in a proper year would have gone in the 1st. That is entirely in the realm of possibility for everyone. It is very much going to be a free-for-all. So really all you want here is just as many tickets as possible in there. And the Canucks did do that to a degree. They didn't get a lot. They got one extra pick. That's still one they didn't have before.
I loved that Jim Benning in his press conference gloated about how he got one extra pick for this year's draft, and was basically gloating about how he got one extra pick and completely ignored the fact that he gave up a pick for next year in a draft that you probably want to have a 3rd round pick. But
did he give up the 3rd round? Sorry, he gave up a 3rd round pick. Is that that's a separate?
No, that's from like a separate deal last year, I believe. I think that's actually the Tyler Toffoli trade.
Okay, sure. We're not going to get into that because that will make me sad. But Madison Bowey does have like there is a sense of, it could work in the right spot here, but it hasn't worked for him on 3 teams before, and he does have a Stanley Cup, which with a capital Stanley Cup championship ring, which Jim Benning does put a premium on, obviously with Nate Schmidt. Or not Nate Schmidt, actually. Sorry, he was gone. He was a Knight at that point. Holtby and Beagle.
Holtby and Beagle, yeah. But
Bowey has played with Schmidt before.
Yeah, like realistically though, like the Comets. Jeez, my brain. The Canucks side is pretty loaded, in the sense that you have Myers, you have Schmidt on that right side as well. Maybe he slots in on a 3rd pair. Maybe. It's a big ass, but Hamonic's there. Like, you're just not gonna, he's pretty much just like a body at this point. Like, he'll probably spend the entire season on the taxi squad, is my guess.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll be a 7th D, but anyway. We won't spend too much time on Bowey because there isn't much to say, just because there's such a small sample size from the last 2 seasons where he hasn't really played all that much.
Yeah,
at least with the Blackhawks this year. Yeah, he's
only played 4 games. He because of taxi squad waivers and other aspects, he just hasn't gotten into a lot of games. The one thing that the Canucks do get out of picking up Madison Bowey, because he has term, I believe he has 1 more year after this, unless I'm mistaken.
He does.
He has 1 more year after this. Okay. So what they do get out of this, essentially, is they have an extra defenseman who they can leave exposed at the expansion draft, the Seattle expansion draft, which does leave them with some flexibility on what they do defensively. I was not necessarily loving this trade until I believe it was Drancer was really making a big push on the and Harmon as well.
It's the expansion draft flexibility that makes it a big deal.
Yes, and that is important. That is very important, because here's the thing: and we're going to get into some of the other trades that happened today in a bit. One of the things that the Canucks do potentially have the opportunity to deal with here is the fact that they don't have a lot of guys who are necessarily worth protecting at the expansion draft. And I have the team here.
That's kind of what makes this move actually baffling, is because you're picking up a defenseman so you can protect who? Like Tyler Myers? Is that really the move here? That's horrifying.
The one that was brought up that, yes, made everybody just shudder to their core. And as besides the fact that it's, again, 7 years of Jim Benning, they still don't have enough players worth protecting at a damn expansion draft, is a failure on its own.
2 expansion drafts in the guy's tenure, and he's had no one worth protecting. That is fucking insane.
Yes, but here's the key here, is that they can go to teams that have too many players, then they can protect, who don't want to lose them to Seattle for nothing, and they can go, hey, we'll take this guy, we have an extra space to take this player, we'll give you so-and-so to make it happen, sort of thing, right? We'll give you this and this too, and then we'll protect them. Because it's not so much about that it's going to be a fleecing for the Canucks in every situation, more or less, because these teams just don't want to lose them to Seattle for nothing or get raked over the coals by the Kraken to protect that guy and have to give up somebody else someone else they like as a favor, basically, right? So it is possible. Like, I mean, we've already saw one of those deals yesterday. I believe the Ducks got Hayden Fleury from the Hurricanes because they have so many good defensemen. They just couldn't protect him, and they didn't want to lose Hayden Fleury.
Must be nice.
Yeah, to the Ducks, and to for nothing to the Kraken. So the Ducks got him. And that's kind of in the same... It's basically the same sort of deal making, and that landed the Canucks Nate Schmidt from the Knights when they were signing Pietrangelo. Basically, they just didn't have the cap space, so the Canucks pounced on that. Same thing with JT Miller and the Lightning to a certain degree. Again, different sort of circumstance with cap stuff, but the Canucks are in a situation where they could very easily get out of some bad contracts or pay some cheap draft picks for a player who's much better than that, much more, just because the team doesn't want to lose them for absolutely nothing. And that's possible. That is a good thing to do here.
They're not going to do that. Are you fucking kidding?
What
look, team are you watching?
We're media. We have to hold out hope here. We have to put out the good vibes when we can, because again, this was
I'm not wearing the shirt, so I can't.
You're not wearing the shirt, but I'm wearing the positivity hat metaphorically, and I'm gonna say that I believe that they can put it together.
There's no fucking way.
Oh man, but I think the Bowey trade could end up being a much better trade in time. Right now, I would say it's more of like, it's a C, it's a B, maybe a B, because they, it helps, every little bit helps of depth, and that's something, cheap depth helps. We've been harping on them to get more of it. That's good.
I voted a D- because all it does is imply to me that they're actually going to fucking protect Tyler Myers at the expansion draft, and that's unacceptable to me, so that's a D- for me.
Well, we shall see. We've got some time before then. And then the last Canucks trade of the day we got to get into, and this is the one that I think
there isn't much to say about this guy.
Jordie Benn traded to Winnipeg for a 2021 6th-round pick. Honestly, tidy trade. I'd give this an A.
Great.
Like, here's the thing. Like, Jordie Benn, I think, ended up becoming... Jordie Benn is one of the players that they actually sold kind of high on. Like, and high, I mean, that sounds a little bit better than it is.
High.
But the thing with this is that at one point, he was just the tax. He was in the scratch. He was a healthy scratch, wasn't playing that much. When he was getting into the lineup, there wasn't a good fit for him. And then they kind of found success for him playing alongside Quinn Hughes. And that really upped his value to the team and possibly to other buyers. And with Winnipeg, they were really looking for depth defensemen because they're definitely going to the playoffs. And they just need bodies. And Jordie Benn has NHL experience. For a lot of NHL experience, if there are injuries, he will be much better as depth as compared to what they would have had from AHL guys, right? Yeah. And the Canucks get a 6th-round pick out of it. Is it a blockbuster trade? No. Absolutely not.
It was a perfectly serviceable trade. That's a B-.
I'm giving it an A for the reason of, this is, again, we say it all the time that Jim Benning doesn't do this enough, and I want to encourage the behavior. So I'm going to give it an A just based on, hey, I want you to do this more. Make me give you A's on your trades more. Do this more often, so I don't have to be as glib about things all the time. Mm-hmm. So I will give it that. And Jordie Benn, loyal foot soldier.
It's fine.
It was his contract. They did exactly what they had to. It was a 2-year contract. Not a lot of like protections or trade protections. It was just meant to be a stopgap, and they moved him. That's exactly what those contracts are for. Jordie Benn did his job, and he did it well for what he was here to do. And yeah, he did go and have fun. Now he's wearing number 40 in honor of Elias Pettersson, apparently. That's what he said in his opening press conference, apparently,
That's
today.
Very, very sweet of him. What a gentle giant with a gentle beard.
Yes, and I believe that rounds us into the corner of, let's go into, I guess, the NHL trade. We're going to kind of rapid fire through some of these, because there were some interesting trades outside of the Canucks yesterday for what we thought was going to be extremely quiet. There ended up being some pretty cool
kind of just like
trades
ramped up out of nowhere.
Yes.
I mean, that's been the last couple of trade deadlines, even pre-COVID, where like all of a sudden from 11 o'clock until 12 noon, it was just like rapid fire, all of the trades being announced at once, which is always kind of funny to me.
Yes.
But yeah, like, I mean, Anthony Mantha gets moved for everything that the Capitals have.
Yes, so the Capitals get Anthony Mantha. The Red Wings get Jakub Vrana, Richard Panik, a first-round pick in 2021, and a second-round pick in 2022. The Capitals just... They're all in. They're very much going all in. This is one of the things, and let me ask you this question. Whether, like, regardless of how the Canucks did this year, I think it's so weird how many teams just went all in. Like, have really just put their chips onto the table this year. Not necessarily because it's of the hockey, but because of the fact of, if you win this year, the actual benefits of winning a Stanley Cup this year that might come from selling, from going all in, you're not going to get, because you're not getting any ticket revenue. You're going to get a lot less merch, like championship merch revenue, like all of that stuff, just because people don't have as much money to spend in a pandemic. Like, sure. I think it's so strange how many teams just were like, nope, we got to go. This is the year. This is the window. And I guess, like, props to them on the sense of they went for it very clearly for hockey reasons and not for money reasons, which is admirable in a sense. But the Capitals sold all
they gave it all
high
baby.
To get Anthony Mantha. And the Red Wings, Steve Yzerman, holy cow, what a deadline for Steve Yzerman again.
Dude, he knows what he's doing, man. He
really does.
I loved his quote where he basically said, like, in 2 years, he's not going to fit where we're at in our rebuild, so it made sense to sell now. Like, that's smart. Like, that's straight up smart. You wish you could see that kind of foresight and planning from this Canucks team, but obviously that is a big ask after 7 years. But Stevie Y knows what he's doing, man. He fuck. I mean, that's a haul and a half that he got for a guy who he knew wasn't going to matter in 2 years. Like, that's...
And I believe it would have been a healthy scratch a couple times this year. He hadn't, unless I'm mistaken.
I'm pretty sure he was at the start of the season, and everyone was losing their mind.
Yeah. As far as a winner, as a I guess we'll say like short-term winners and stuff here, or short-term and long-term winners here. I mean, obviously, if the Capitals win the Cup, like, yes, they won in the short term.
Yeah.
But right now, I mean, the Red Wings made out like bandits. They get Vrana, who's struggled to get the ice time, and according to the Capitals, like, they just the fit just wasn't there for him that they might want there. And he's definitely going to get his opportunities with the Red Wings for sure. They got out of a bad contract with Panik, I believe, that just didn't work out for them. And the Red Wings again get bodies, but the picks are where it matters. And the Red Wings are doing a great job at accumulating those picks, and they're doing some fantastic work on that front. So this is very much in the long term, the Red Wings are going to come out on top on this one, right? I would say.
Yeah, no surprise.
All right, next trade. Let's go into. We already kind of went in on this one just a little bit. Hayden Fleury to the Ducks for the Hurricanes getting Yanni Hakanpää. Thank you. And a 6th round pick in 2022. Trade.
That's a good trade for Anaheim. Yeah. And for the Canes, really. Yeah, it's kind of a win-win.
They don't get the downside is they don't get Fleury in the playoffs like they could use, because they're a sneaky team that I think is going to go a good distance here. But at the end of the day, they were going to lose. They were almost certainly going to lose him to Seattle for nothing. and they get a prospect and a pick out of it. That's worth it. That's a good trade for both teams here. And the Ducks, they need prospects. They have not been doing well this year. This has been a very bad year for Anaheim. They do have who is it? Drysdale, Jamie Drysdale.
Jamie Drysdale's in the system.
And then
they got Zegras coming in this year.
And Zegras,
both
of them have played this year and looked decent in their NHL time. Apparently, they were trying to move Ryan Getzlaf as well, which would have been crazy if that had happened. All right, next trade. Michael Rothel goes to, again, Capitals, getting Michael Rothel, 5th-round pick for the Flyers. The Flyers are in a bit of a weird spot where
they are.
I believe Rothel is a UFA, but also the Flyers are a team that has not done well, that has not lived up to the expectations they set for themselves last year. Carter Hart has been struggling, but so has the defense in front of him. This is more or less just another one of those. It's a bit of a cleanup duty for both.
There's not much
the Capitals going all in. Yep.
Yeah.
Here's one we'll definitely enjoy talking about for a brief moment. Is Eric Goodbranson acquired by the Predators in exchange for Brandon Fortunato and a 7th-round pick in 2023. The Senators getting picks and a prospect for a guy who probably shouldn't. Who the Predators? Here's the thing: the real question mark here is why are the Predators buying? Why are the Predators? Whether or not, regardless of who it is, why are they buying at all? Like this, that's a terrible decision.
It's bizarre in the sense that they historically have history as good eyes for defensive talent.
Yeah.
So it's what do they see that everyone else in the last 5 years seemingly missed? Because he has not been good in the slightest. So it's
judging by the pick they gave, which is a 7th rounder in 2023. So I don't think it's so much even that they necessarily believe he's going to turn things around as much as they were just looking for depth, playoff depth, which is still odd considering where they are in the standings and how they've done this year. I know UC Saros has really picked up his game lately and has been playing really, really well. I believe they just kicked the Lightning up and down the ice today, 7-2 or 8-2.
They destroyed him.
They destroyed Tampa today, which is stunning. So maybe we're wrong here, but I still think it's just that they are making a bit of a... When it comes to the long term, they're making a big mistake by not selling because, they kept Matthias Ekholm, they kept Ryan Ellis, they kept all of their trade chips. They didn't move anybody, which I think is going to come back to bite them. For Ottawa, hey, keep getting them in. Keep getting the picks where you can. Yeah.
But speaking of the Lightning, a trade that I liked of theirs, they traded Frederick Claesson for
Magnus.
They traded Magnus Krona. Sorry, I like the trade for San Jose, not the Lightning, but the Lightning trade Magnus Krona, who is a monstrous goaltender.
I don't know much about him. Tell me about him.
All I know is he's highly revered in some of the goalie circles because of the fact that he's a giant, and he's put up very good numbers in the NCAA as I think he's only 20, maybe 19 or something like that. I think this is his second year and he might have turned 20 this year, but the dude is just a monster. And obviously the Lightning are in a position where they have Vasilevsky signed for, ages. So they're probably thinking, before we get a good read on whether his game can translate to the AHL or the NHL, why don't we trade him for something we know we can get in Claesson? So it's a weird trade from them, but at the same time, I kind of understand the thought process behind it. But your boys, the Sharks, the hometown heroes, might actually get themselves a fucking goaltender that can stop a goddamn puck for a change.
Yeah, the Sharks are in desperate need of goaltending help, not just in the whole organization is they have some guys, I believe the guy coming in that could be something is I want to say I think his name is Zachary Emond. They drafted a couple years ago. He's supposed to be decent as well. And Josef Koronash, who I covered in the AHL, just made his debut, his NHL debut last week. And shout out to him for getting there. I'm really happy for that guy. He was working really hard at the AHL level, and it's good to see him his dues paying off. But the Martin Jones has not worked out. I have the jersey sitting back there. But that's a trade. Obviously that contract's not going anywhere for a long period of time, but they just they definitely need the prospects. They don't have a lot of like A-list prospects in the goaltending department. They have some like bets, some bets they've hedged that could do all right, but they're not surefire. And I guess if Magnus Krona is expected to be something, that would be a huge boost for them. I will say the name is a little unfortunate this year. It looks a little like Corona, and I think that's a bit unfortunate. Honestly, let's just group all the Sharks trades in here, because you know what, the Sharks did very well. They got involved in the Matthias Janmark trade with the Golden Knights. Then they sent them a Nick DeSimone, who had been in the Barracuda, playing for the Barracuda for quite a while. They got involved with Chicago in the three-way deal with the Blackhawks and got a 5th round pick out of that trade, which honestly
kind of actually blew my mind, because I didn't think the Sharks had any cap space to be making moves like this, but somehow they did. They got involved.
Yeah, they did an excellent job this year of they moved out Devin Dubnyk, which cleared up some room. They moved him to Colorado for depth, because they needed goaltending depth, and I guess we'll get into that as well. They did an excellent job of really just they got Greg Patterin as well out of that trade as well. They got involved in the Nick Foligno trade with the Leafs, which we'll get into more in a bit, but they got involved they really had their hands in a lot of trades this year that really have worked out, that are, because this team needs draft picks. They're very much in the middle of they don't have any major prospects coming up through the pipeline right now, because they've been so good for such a long time that they ended up trading a lot of those guys away. And their system has some guys who could do all right, but they don't have enough. They're very much in rebuild mode. And so for them to go out and get involved in a couple of these trades that really had, that there were small bits and pieces, they're just picking up a draft pick here and there, that's great. That's smart, heads-up thinking, and that gets you a long way down the road. They traded Antti Suomela to the Leafs, who was somebody that they had really high hopes for, in exchange for Alexander Barabanov, who I think was supposed to be doing all right for the Leafs at some point. The Sharks did very well. The Sharks did very well this year, and we'll talk about them in the winners circle when we get to the end here. Yeah. Speaking of defensemen and whatnot going to Toronto, they needed bodies, because they went all in. They are very much one of the all in teams. They pick up Ben Hutton, our old buddy Ben Hutton, which brought up the resurfaced Barbie girl video.
Always a favorite. Always love to see it.
I completely forgot about that trade or that video, and it's funny. I busted a gut. I busted a gut.
My life.
Those are simpler times. Again, Ducks getting a pick out of it. They move a guy that wasn't going to help them for the long-term future. The Leafs get the depth that they need. That's a good move for both.
Completely fine trade. If he's in a sheltered role, he will be a very fine defenseman for them.
Yes. Let's get into some of the big trades here, because we don't have time to get into all of them. We've already mentioned the Leafs. There's 2 big trades that they were involved with this weekend. The first was acquiring a 3-way deal with the Jackets and the Sharks that got them Nick Foligno and Stefan Noesen in exchange with a first-round pick going to the Jackets for this year, a 4th-round pick in 2022, and the Sharks getting a 4th-round pick in 2021. Nick Foligno was an interesting choice. Some people we know whose opinions we trust say that he's a pretty good fit for them. In terms of what his style of play is, it's a bit more hard-nosed. is still a playmaker, but has not picked up a lot of points this year. I don't know. I don't love this. I think they bought real high for a guy who is who's getting a lot older.
It's the same thing as like we were saying, like a lot of teams are in their win now mode, right? So the Leafs think that they need like a guy who's like a really elite defensive forward who can chip in offense here and there. He'll probably be a good fit with their team just because it's the Leafs. They're really fucking good. Obviously, pretty heavy overpay.
Yes.
But if you're Kyle Dubas, you need to prove that your team can break out of like the first round. And if Foligno's the type of guy, like, I mean, if a lot of people were comparing like, oh, this is kind of like what Tanner Pearson could have been if Nick Foligno's going for this. It's like, well, unfortunately, Nick Foligno's actually having a better productive season this year and has like a better history of not being like as streaky as Tanner Pearson has. And he's not on an extended deal. So total rental, like, I mean, if it pays off, it pays off. If not, whatever.
Yeah. The other rental, well, actually, I don't know if this is a rental specifically, but the other guy they picked up for goaltending depth was David Riddick from the Flames, which is kind of a trade that just came out of nowhere. I mean, it makes sense for both sides, really. I mean, the Leafs have very much gone into the if Sportsnet and TSN haven't been beating you over the head with it enough, Jack Campbell is on an 11-game unbeaten streak. Or did that end tonight? Did they lose?
No,
lose to Calgary? They did lose to Calgary.
They played David Riddick though.
That's right. They did play David Riddick. Okay, That's the thing I'm forgetting. Right. Okay, but anyway, Jack Campbell's on an 11-game winning streak that people are really getting excited about on the national networks. A little too excited. As much as I do like Jack Campbell, he seems like a very nice guy, a very sweet guy. It's just been a bit much, and but the underlying part of that whole thing is that Freddie Anderson has been atrocious this year, and now he's injured. He's on LTIR, and with David Riddick coming into the fold, as with them already having also Michael Hutchison in the system, this is very much a message of the Freddie Anderson era is over. Like, they got Riddick to back up Campbell. They're not, like, I would be stunned if Anderson played another game for the rest of the year. Like, he's done. Like, there's no place to put him.
They're definitely going to be hoping that Jack Campbell is their Cam Ward, basically. This is their year where they think they can ride, like, the Andrew Hammond, Cam Ward type wave where this unsung hero comes out of nowhere and carries them to the victory. That's fine. Let it happen.
And at the very least, Riddick is experienced as a starting goaltender, so they did the right thing, which is that they were like, okay, that 11-game streak or whatever is not going to last forever. So let's get a goalie who, well, I think has maybe been overrated a tad at times, is still serviceable and can play in a pinch. Can absolutely come in a pinch and do well for you. Big save, Dave. He can. And obviously with Jacob Markstrom's contract, he wasn't going to be getting a lot of ice time anymore in Calgary. And even if he was, there was no long-term future for him there because they're going to have to make the Markstrom contract work regardless of how well David Riddick did. So it was a smart call on the Flames' part to go and get that third-round pick for him while they could. And the Leafs get that goaltending depth that they very much crave.
Indeed.
The other two big trades that we'll get into right now, before we kind of call it quits here for tonight, because it's late. It's getting late here. Although we've only been going for an hour 20, it seems like we've been going for a lot longer.
That's what late hours of the night feel like. They feel like days.
Yes, and I have to stay up and edit this, so there's that as well. The biggest, I up until the Mantha Vrana trade, maybe even still, this was the biggest deal of the whole deadline week. which was the Boston Bruins acquiring Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar for
literally nothing.
Icelandic sensation Bjork is a talented musician and a great pickup for anybody. I'm stealing that joke from Daniel Wagner, but who has been just pumping out the great content lately. But anyway, the Sabres get Anders Bjork and a second-round pick in 2021. Okay, here's the big question here. Did the Sabres sell ridiculously low on Taylor Hall, or is that just how little people think of Taylor Hall now? Because he hasn't been good this year, that's for darn sure. He only has one goal.
Thomas Drance said publicly that Taylor Hall's stock is really down in the league because that's just the way they view him. And I feel like people forget, like, isn't he making $8 million for a single year? Like, with an NMC? So. Like, that's, how the fuck are you supposed to move that?
I mean, the Sabres no retention. Retain the full amount, I do believe.
Yeah, so...
or half of it. Sorry, half of it. They had to retain the full 50%.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's very Sabres of them. Like, they signed this gigantic deal, and kind of, like, Taylor Hall, like, you're an idiot, too, for signing such a fucking giant deal. Why would you sign that?
Well, it's not that big.
It's $8 million. Why would you sign a single year?
It's a lot of money, but it's 1 year deal. So the idea was that this was supposed to be the I'm hedging the bet on myself sort of thing. I mean, I don't think any of us expected that contract to turn out this badly. Like, no one expected
it's to go Sabres. How could you not? It's a terrible deal. Because
one goal is still too little. It's still less. That's beneath expectations for Sabres suckitude, I would argue. That part came out of left field. Come on.
The whole thing was he was signing a 1 year extension with the purposes that it would rebuild his stock so he could go elsewhere. So
yes,
if you really wanted to, wouldn't you take a smaller like paycheck so that you have a better chance of getting moved to an actual contender? I mean, Boston looks like they are going to be a contender this year, but it isn't like Tampa. Like, say, like he signed like a 1 year, $2 million deal. Buffalo uses the excess $6 million to get like a bona fide starting goaltender or something. Like, they're in on Markstrom or something for all you know, right? And then suddenly, if they're a better team and they actually go for playoffs with Buffalo, then his stock rises even further because it's Taylor Hall and whatever. He's finally not on a bottom feeder. Yeah. Or they play like shit still, and then he gets traded to Tampa because it's easier to retain $2 million than it is $4 million and still get a premium deal out of it.
Or like Colorado or Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe Toronto. Toronto was interested at one point. They definitely wanted him at some point.
Exactly. So it's just like it's just a funny deal because it encapsulates everything about like the Sabres that is funny, where they get nothing in return for two players. That's awesome.
I will say, and I think it was Rachel Dory put this best on Twitter, where she was like, this is a trade that you should sleep on. If this is the offer, you wait a day, you wait until the next day to actually make the decision, which is not what the Sabres did. They made that trade at late night on the 11th. It says 12th. It says like midnight on April 12th, but it was which means for us it was still like 9 p.m. over here on the West Coast, right? So they made it the day before, essentially. They made that trade the day before the deadline. And she's totally right. Like, this is you should absolutely have waited for the market to get a little better or people to get a little more desperate and offer you more. Because you very clearly went panicked. The Sabres very clearly panicked that they weren't going to get anything for him and sold him too quickly. And sure enough, the next day, players of arguably lesser caliber,
much lesser caliber,
started going for higher picks,
upside,
for more draft picks. Like, you should have waited. You very easily should have waited. And then the last trade of the big ones that we'll get into here Jeff Carter going to the Penguins for a conditional third-round pick in 2022 and a conditional fourth-round pick in 2023 going back to the LA Kings.
Yeah,
I don't know what the conditions are on that. I think this is... Well,
if they win
for the
conference,
Kings, I think this is a good trade.
If they get to the conference finals, the conditionals jump up a year and up a round for both, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's something weird like that,
But see, I think this is a
Brian Burke trade. That's what it is.
Yes, I maintain this is a very dumb trade for the Penguins because I get that they're going all in, but literally the thing that they needed the absolute least was to make their team even older, and they made them older. Older and slower. Yeah. That is the big problem for the Penguins, is that a lot of their players are old and slow, and this is not it. This was not the trade that Taylor Hall would have been a better pickup in a certain sense here because at least he's young and kind of can move his feet. I get that Jeff Carter has more points, but he's old. And this is also a very Ron Hextall move because he loves Jeff Carter and he loves Mike Richards.
Sure does.
Because he was part of the management team in the Kings when they won the Cup those two times with Jeff Carter and Mike Richards. I believe he was instrumental in getting them there in the first place. It's just it could work out, but I'm very much on the train of the Penguins are not going to make it past round one. So I think this was a very silly trade to make. Well, but I guess if the conditions are they only get the picks if they make it to the conference final.
No, they still get the picks, but if they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, then they become even better picks, which is
okay.
Very funny.
Very, very well. If they make the Cup Final, I guess you did what you asked, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They did. You did the thing. You did the important part, and so it doesn't matter in the long run. But right now, a third and a fourth, it's not a lot, granted, but it still kind of feels like I don't see why you needed to make that trade. Or if you were going to make a trade to go all in for this group this year, there were younger, better options for you out there.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
I think with that, that's it from the trade standpoint. Was there any other trades you wanted to talk about before we get into anything else here? Before we get into okay.
No, man, that's I think pretty much the big deadline day. I don't think anything else really. Like most of the trades were pretty boring. Like they were just pretty standard. Picks
the trade deadline's always underwhelming. They're all it's literally the Mantha trade, the Mantha Verana trade was actually oh my god, that's actually kind of fun because it wasn't a trade for two guys with two expiring contracts on it's guys with term moving what they call the hockey deal because
the hockey deal is always fun to watch. Hockey deal,
right? I guess if you were to label a winner and a loser of the deadline, who would you pick out of the teams involved?
Would the winner be
Winner could be anybody. I would say for me, I'll give you some time. I'll say the winners for me were San Jose. San Jose was a big one because even though they sold, they got involved in trades that they didn't necessarily that they could have. And they found creative ways to get involved and get picks and prospects from other teams that were needed help with making the numbers, crunching the numbers cap. And that's great. That's the kind of thinking that gets you farther and gets you back to contention faster. So I would put them in that department. I would say I feel like Florida did all right this year. They bring in Lucas Wallmark. They get who was the other guy they picked up here? Oh, they picked up Sam Bennett from the Flames. They paid a bit of a premium to get him, but honestly, the Panthers are a team that needs to get into the playoffs, whatever the cost, and actually do some damage. Yeah. And they're, again, another sleeper pick, I think, who could do actually really decently. Chris Drieger has been fantastic in them for net. He made a great save tonight in the game against Dallas. Tonight, they're I believe tied for first in the division right now. So I think they're a winner here. And I'll let you go. Let's see. What are your winners here, if you had to pick some?
I'd probably say the winners are the Chicago Blackhawks, sadly.
Really?
Despite the fact that they took on a bunch of salary with like Brett Connolly with a trade for Lucas Wallmark and whatever the other Carlson or whatever his name
Riley
was.
Stillman, Henrik Borgstrom are the ones they get bringing
Yeah,
in. They take out.
Henrik
They send out.
Borgstrom is like a good pickup because if he returns to the States, like that's a pretty big boost. Like when I saw him with Springfield, whatever the fucks, I thought
The
he was actually pretty
Thunderbirds.
good in the one game that I saw of him. But yeah, they trade out like basically a bunch of nothing and get cap space, bunch of prospects, a second round pick, third round pick, fourth round pick, and a seventh round pick, and two like legitimately decent players. Like that's a good haul for like a team that's still technically like on the cusp of like making playoffs.
Yeah. I forgot to also mention the Panthers did pick up Brandon Montour from the Sabres. That was a nice piece of trade. That was a nice trade for the Sabres. That was actually a good. That was the Hall trade really made it bittersweet because that was actually a decent trade for them because Montour wasn't working there, and I think it's another case of it's the Buffalo curse, and once he goes to Florida, he'll do probably better. So for them to get a third round pick out of that was great. Yeah. Also, I should mention, oh my god, because they always win, the freaking Lightning getting David Savard with that cap space, with that Kucherov definitely not injured cap space.
Totally fine.
Totally not circumvention of the cap.
Yeah.
Again, if you can find loopholes in the rules, I'm not actually gonna fault you on that. So good on them for finding the loopholes in the system. The Red Wings, also a winner. They also did very well. Steve Yzerman continues to fleece everybody in his path. And
didn't even need to say it because we all just know. If Stevie Y is at the deadline, he's probably doing something very good.
Yes. And if he likes if he calls you, immediately put the phone. Hang up.
Disconnect it.
Losers of the deadline. I'm not going to put Buffalo in there because I think the Hall trade wasn't good enough, but again, his stock has dropped so much that it's kind of hard for them to really give them a hard time about it. I guess if I had to put a loser in there, I'm going to throw the Canucks in. The Canucks did not do enough. They needed to do more. For sure, I would put them in there. I could still argue that they shouldn't be necessarily in the losers setup. I think I'm just salty. I think you got to put in who didn't get involved? Edmonton.
Arizona didn't do anything.
Arizona and Edmonton. Yes, thank you. Those are the two biggest
Minnesota
losers.
Didn't do anything either, I don't think.
Okay, so starting with Edmonton, they're a team that absolutely needs to surround Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl with more help, and they didn't. And
interestingly enough, sorry not to cut you off, but Ken Holland then had a quote where he's like, some years you just know when to not go all in on a deadline. So it's kind of like, does he not think that this is the year for the Edmonton Oilers and that's not worth going all in? I don't know. It's very interesting that he came out with that quote.
Maybe he's thinking in my stance, in my viewpoint, where it's the this year they're getting there's no revenue, there's not the added bonuses of making the playoffs, so it's not worth spending. Maybe he's thinking in that regard, but even still, that's real weird for a team that has missed the playoffs as many times as the Oilers have in the last
20 years, whatever.
15 years, I believe. 15 years they've missed it.
They
made it once
when your window's open. It's like,
buddy. Well, I guess they did get Dmitry Kulikov. That was a decent pickup for them, but I would still put them in the losers because that wasn't enough. They didn't do enough for what they need to do. Arizona, huge loser here because they're fighting for that last wildcard spot, and of all the teams aside from Florida, out of all the teams in the league that should absolutely be gunning for a playoff spot to give any sort of semblance of success and well-run organization aspects to the fans, the Coyotes needed it, and they did nothing. That team is that is going to, I think that's going to come back to haunt them very quickly, because they need a playoff spot more than just about anybody for the, hey, look, we can actually make the playoffs and do some damage now on a regular basis aspect, and they're not doing it. That's a huge L for them.
Yeah, totally.
Would you put anyone else in there?
No, Arizona was going to be my team that fucked up the deadline. Like, in their position, like, you had to do something. If you're not contending, then sell. And they didn't do literally anything, so they're my losers.
All right, and I think we'll end this episode off very briefly with if you're still here, because this has been a long one. This has been a very long episode. We're gonna end it because we haven't done it in about a month. Cody's Comets Corner, because it's time. God. You haven't done one in ages. We'll keep it quick. We'll keep it very easy and quick here. So the Comets,
pretty simple. Comets came back from their month-long layoff with a weekend back-to-back. They played Friday and Saturday against Rochester and Syracuse, respectively, and then they played again today against Syracuse. As expected, they look like complete dog shit against both teams on the weekend, because, as one would expect, a team coming off of a COVID layoff, it's going to look very bad in their first games back. And for whatever fucking reason, the AHL scheduling committee decided to just completely blow up the AHL or the Comet schedule by giving them, I think, 6 games in their first 9 games back or something like that, or 5. It's like 5 and 9. I can't remember. But point is, they look like shit. Today, they played against a Syracuse team that was without its 2 top players in Alex Barré-Boulet and Mitchell Stevens. And wouldn't you know it, the Comets actually looked pretty decent in the second and third period. And that's after getting completely destroyed in the first period. Like, I'm not joking. In my game recap, I included timestamps of whenever the Comets left their zone, because it happened twice in the first 10 minutes. That's it. They left their zone to change. So Jack Rathbone didn't step onto the ice until 16:42 of the first period, because the Comets took a penalty within the first 12 seconds. And so the penalty killers came out. They then got hemmed into their zone when whoever it was came onto the ice. And then when it returned to 5-on-5, they got stuck in their zone. And someone else took a penalty while they were still hemmed in the zone. So they went back on the penalty kill. So it was like 14:42 in the first period when Jack Rathbone actually stepped onto the ice for a shift of 5-on-5. It was ugly as fuck, to say the least. And props to them. They came back and they eventually ended up winning. Check out my recap on cometsharvest.com to find out more. But
yes,
it was a good game. Yeah.
Based on your expectations of what they were coming into from that giant COVID layoff, would you say they were above your expectation or below it, or right?
They were
exactly
completely in line with where I expected them to be. Like, this season's weird enough that there's so little talent distributed amongst the AHL teams that any night some team is probably going to look like a monstrous squad, and the other team's going to look like dog shit. Tonight, the Syracuse Crunch, despite having dominated the Comets on Saturday, it looked like complete dog shit tonight. And then you add in the fact that they're coming off this giant layoff. So, like, my expectations were bottom of the barrel. I pretty much said as much in my game recap that you can't actually take anything of note from these games because they're coming off such an awful health situation that if they come in and look rusty, you can't be like, oh, they made a bad pass or a giveaway, because it's like, who cares? Like, they're coming off such a break and their health is so fucked with that, like, they're gonna look like shit for the first week and a half, basically. Mm-hmm. It's happened to every single NHL team so far that's had this happen to them. So my expectations were very low. I had zero belief that they would be able to win tonight, but the Syracuse Crunch aren't the same team without Alex Barré-Boulet as they are with it. So it worked in their favor. help them shake the cobwebs off, and maybe it'll be a little different as the weekend comes up here when they play Friday again, and
Yep.
I think Saturday or Sunday or Monday. I can't remember. It's a
It's up
absolutely insane schedule. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my game recap at cometsharvest.com, because I put in some screen caps of the schedule, and like just look at their May schedule. It is
I can pull
it
that
is
up right
one
now.
of the stupidest things you'll ever see.
I can
It
pull
is
that up right
insane.
now. There it is.
Yeah.
It's not good. Yeah, it's the April and 20 is just a big old mess. You got 2 back-to-backs in 1 week, and then you got 7 you got what if I'm counting this correctly, 8 games in 13 days.
Yeah.
If I got that correct.
Which is just the stupidest thing, because like I said, there's no Calder playoffs you're playing for, so it's just like who was asking for 19 games in 36 fucking days? You know what I mean? Like, nobody cares. Who cares? There's no broadcast dollars. There's AHL TV, and that's it. Like, there was no need for this many games.
Or at the very least, there's no need for them to squish it all together when they could have just spaced it out a little longer.
Exactly.
And frankly, this is a good insight into what's about to happen for the Canucks here too, because this is pretty much this is very close to what you're about to see the Canucks go on.
Yes.
The kind of run they're about to go on for the next little bit. The last thing I wanted to ask you very quick. Yeah, the last thing I wanted to ask you, I know you said don't take too much stock into what's been going on, into what the actual on-ice stuff and the on-ice play, but Jonah Gadjevich has come back doing just pretty much picking up where he left off. How has he looked, and does it feel like it's maybe getting closer to a sustainability set, especially considering what he's come back from? It's still you don't
Honestly,
feel it's sustainable.
I understand why the hype would be there. It's a kid scoring every single game at the AHL level, but just based on what I see, he is a guy whose specialty is skating to the net and standing there and letting Sam Ennis deflect pucks off of his stick while he stands at the front of the net, which is a skill. But
honestly, it's a skill the Canucks need more of. They don't have enough guys who stand in front of the net.
True. But pretending that Gadjevich is somehow like this elite goal scorer, or like this like surefire prospect now or again, because he's benefiting from playing on a top line with top line distributors like Sam Ennis, like quad A talent, it's a bit much for me. I still don't see any semblance of a defensive game. I don't think he has the skating to be even worthy of a call-up. I've said this before in my game recaps, but Justin Bailey has wheels for days, and he proved he could score with his speed. And his game still barely translates to the NHL. Like, he just now, as a 26-year-old, started to maybe, and I'm using like asterisks and air quotes, he might have started to gain trust with Travis Green after having 2 solid games for them before getting injured by Milan Lucic. Zach McEwen in his breakout year was basically just going gung-ho with his back checking, his defensive play. Even though he's bad at it, he was at least showing the effort that he would skate like a madman in the offensive zone, try and score, and then outrace his own defense into the defensive zone on a back check. Like, the kid wanted to prove he was at least gonna hustle and make it count, even if he didn't actually do anything off of it. Whereas Gadjevich, I see him racing to the offensive zone, but he's never the first man back. He's usually the highest man in the slot, in the defensive zone or in the neutral zone. He just doesn't have the speed to be that game breaker. And you can see with a guy like Justin Bailey where he does have game-breaking speed, and it isn't even good enough to make it translate at the NHL level. So it's great for him that he's scoring at the rate he is. I think he's got 11 goals on the team right now. It's the team lead. I mean, that's pretty much all you can really take away from it, is he's having a good year, but it's against a drastically depleted talent level in the AHL, and it's not through like, say, the Cole Lind or Justin Bailey type work ethic that was required to score goals. It's basically just standing still, which is a bit
Fair
harsh,
enough.
but
And,
I mean, it's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it is. And you mentioned his skating, and obviously you mentioned his skating. You mentioned the fact that he is very much a streaky scorer type, Frank. And the fact of the matter is, like, right now for the Canucks, from the Canucks standpoint, the way that they look at team building, there's not a spot for him there. He would have to be playing in the top 6, which he's just not good enough to do. Right?
Exactly.
Which he's just not good enough to do. Because they don't have because they don't consider the third line of scoring line. They consider
they need to be a
line.
shutdown line or a checking line, right? And
right.
so if you can't,
that's not
if
what
you can't PK, then you're not going to get a long leash trying to break the Canucks as they are currently constructed. Which is also why you look at the trade they made for Matthew Highmore. They were told he is a shutdown checking defensive center. Adam Gaudette wasn't, so therefore, yeah, so they placed a premium on that for that two-way skill. And honestly, like, Gadjevich isn't a two-way player. Like, I would put Will Lockwood and his 2 points or his 0 points or whatever it is above him because he has NHL skating, but he actually has a defensive game. So
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, and that's Comet service for this Tuesday, and hopefully it's going to be a bit of a rough go for you coming up, but
I'm going to be trying my hardest to try and get into episodes in the coming weeks. If you weren't watching the YouTube video, it is about as ugly as it sounds with 19 games in 36 days. Trying to squeeze data tracking in that, and a lot of them are back to backs. Like, it's going to be really tough.
Literally every week coming up, there's a Friday game. So I believe I'm lucky enough that this was. I think we're lucky enough that this is the only Tuesday game for the rest of the year. That'll be good. But for the Fridays, we'll figure that out.
Fridays is going to be what the fuck are we going to figure out? But we'll figure it out for you guys because we appreciate you guys listening to us. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Comets Harvest. Our
the
day late
CreaseCast.
Trade led. What did I say?
The CreaseCast, not you said the Comets Harvest.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very tired.
Wow, way to plug you. Yes, you are very. He's worked very hard, people. Give him props. If we were giving out Infinity Gauntlets this week, he'd be getting one because he literally wrote an entire article, covered an entire game, and then came back and did the pod tonight at literally as we approach midnight recording this.
And then you and I will both be waking up at 6 a.m. Actually, I'll be up at 5:30, but
always on the pod. We do this because we have aspirations for bigger stuff, but also because we like bringing you guys the content and everything.
Yeah. So thanks, guys, for listening to Sakaris and Price. We really appreciate it. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel. Rate, like, subscribe to us. That's CreaseCast, not Sakaris and Price. That was just a joke, everyone.
That was a joke, yes.
But you can follow me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter. And you can follow me on cometsharvest.com for all my latest game day recaps. Amazingly, the Comets are, in fact, playing hockey, as we just described. Lachlan, where can the fine fans of the CreaseCast find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lach and the Crease, and as well as I do some stuff on TikTok sometimes now as well. And
big fan.
Big fan, yeah. And as well as my writing, and you can find my writing work over at lachandthecrease.com, where I do the North Division Power Rankings every single week when the Canucks are playing. So the last couple weekends hasn't been there, but we will be back 100% for sure this Sunday. As the Canucks get ready to play their first game. Our next podcast will be immediately after Canucks and Oilers on the Friday night. You can also check out our did you mention the Patreon? I forget, but probably not.
I got the name of our podcast wrong, so there's zero chance that I plugged the Patreon.
Yes. So the Patreon you can join for $5 a month. You can jump in on our bonus Pod Squad tier, and which gets you our off the post episodes, which we were going to do one this weekend, but then the Canucks signing Tanner
They
Pearson
signed
dropped,
Tanner Pearson, so we
had
switched that up a bit. Yeah.
And Cody's been very busy with the Comets return, so we had to shuffle some stuff around. We'll be back with I believe we'll be doing an off the post episode for sure this week. When we find I believe close, probably either like Thursday or something. But yeah, you can check that out. You also get perks like sometimes like early access to some of our articles, as well as updates on the sites, and as well as access to our Discord channel where we chat sometimes as well. Or going to be chatting more as we go forward here. And I think that's it. I think that's everything. Have we missed anything on this trade deadline? Nobody got traded. None of us got traded. That's the important part.
As far as we know, we haven't been traded. But anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode, whenever that will be. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.